Your mother never showed up. My father said that to every teacher, every coach, every neighbor, every stranger who asked for 22 years. He said it the way you'd report a fact. Flat. Practiced. The way someone says she's lactose intolerant or she moved to Florida. Not angry. Not sad. Just done. My name is Sophie Bennett. I'm 31 years old. My mother died last spring. Breast cancer. Diagnosed in October, gone by March. I held her hand at the end. My father didn't come. He hadn't spoken to her in 22 years. He didn't send flowers. He didn't send a card. He sent silence, which is what he'd been sending her since I was 9. The memorial slideshow was supposed to end with my father's tribute, a short speech about co-parenting and grace. That's what my Aunt Lorraine had arranged. She thought it would be the decent thing. She was wrong. The slideshow didn't end with my father's tribute. It ended with 1,400 photographs he'd spent 22 years pretending didn't exist. When the lights came on, my father's hands were covering his face. 53 people saw everything he'd erased. If stories like mine matter to you, that subscribe button means more than you know. Let me take you back to the fall of 2002. Greenville, South Carolina. A yellow brick ranch house on Oakmont Drive with a chain-link fence and a magnolia tree in the front yard that dropped white petals on the driveway every May. My parents married young. My father, Richard Bennett, was 23. My mother, Vivian, was 21. He worked for a commercial insulation company out of a warehouse in Malden. She answered phones at a dentist's office on Wade Hampton Boulevard. They met at a church picnic. He brought her a plate of potato salad and she told him his shirt was untucked. He said later that he knew right then she'd never let him get away with anything. They had me in 1994. I was the only child. Not by choice. My mother had 3 miscarriages after me. She didn't talk about it much. I found out later from Aunt Lorraine that my father blamed her for not being able to have more children. He never said it directly. He just stopped talking about family size. Stopped mentioning brothers or sisters. Stopped buying the 4-bedroom house they'd been saving for. They stayed on Oakmont Drive. 3 bedrooms. 1 empty. The door stayed closed. When I was 5, my mother let me help her plant tomatoes in the backyard. We dug the holes with our hands. She showed me how to press the soil around the stems gently, like tucking them in. My father came outside and said the rows were crooked. He pulled out his tape measure and made us start over. The tomatoes came in straighter, but I remember my mother's rows better. My father was a planner. He kept a notebook in his truck with columns for expenses, mileage, and work orders. He organized the garage by tool, type, and size. He rotated tires on a schedule. He was the kind of man who believed that if you controlled enough details, nothing could surprise you. And for a long time, nothing did. My mother was different. She sang while she cooked. She left notes in my lunchbox, little drawings of cats and suns, and one time, a stick figure of me hitting a home run even though I'd struck out 3 times the game before. She smelled like vanilla lotion and downy fabric softener. She read to me every night until I was 11. Not picture books. Real books? Charlotte's Web. Bridge to Terabithia. The Giver. She did voices for every character. My father said it was a waste of time. He said, I should be doing math drills. She babies you, he said one Thanksgiving, loud enough for my Uncle Ray to hear. That's why you're soft. I was 7. I didn't know what soft meant in that context, but I knew it wasn't a compliment. There were good days, too. I have to say that. My mother took me to the state fair when I was 7. We rode the Ferris wheel twice. She bought me a funnel cake bigger than my head and didn't care when I got powdered sugar on her shirt. She won a stuffed bear at the ring toss. 3 tries, 3 rings. The booth operator said he'd never seen anyone do that. She gave me the bear. I named it Biscuit. I still have it. It sits on a shelf in my closet behind a stack of sweaters where my father never looked. She taught me to braid my own hair the same summer. We sat on the bathroom floor, both of us in the mirror, and she showed me how to cross 3 strands over and under until they held. Everything strong is just smaller things woven together, she said. I was 7. I remembered that sentence for 24 years before I understood what she was really talking about. My mother made the best grilled cheese in the world. American cheese on white bread with butter on the outside, cooked slow in a cast-iron skillet until both sides were dark gold and the cheese was completely melted. Every Saturday, without fail, she cut them diagonal. My father cut his straight. I always ate mine the way she cut them. He noticed. He never said anything, but he noticed. The split happened in the spring of 2003. I was 9. I don't remember the fight that ended it. I remember the aftermath. A Tuesday morning. My mother's closet was empty. Her toothbrush was gone from the bathroom. The vanilla lotion was missing from the nightstand. The house smelled like Pine Sol because my father had cleaned everything before I woke up, like he was removing evidence. He sat me down at the kitchen table. He had a bowl of Cheerios in front of me, which he never made. He made oatmeal. Cheerios were my mother's thing. Your mom needed to leave for a while, he said. She's not well. She needs help. When she's better, she'll come back. I ate the Cheerios. I didn't ask where she went. I didn't ask when she'd be back. I was 9. I trusted the man sitting across from me with the same automatic faith that children give to gravity. You don't question it. You just believe the floor will hold. She didn't come back. Not that week. Not that month. Not that year. I waited. Kids wait differently than adults. Adults wait with their minds. Kids wait with their bodies. I waited by the window after school. I waited at the mailbox. I waited at the kitchen table with an extra placemat that I set out every dinner for 3 weeks until my father put it back in the drawer without saying a word. By the 4th week, the extra placemat stayed in the drawer. By the 6th week, I stopped looking at the window. By the end of the school year, I'd learned the lesson my father wanted me to learn. She wasn't coming. And the reason she wasn't coming was that she didn't want to. That was the story. His story. The only one I had. What I learned much later, years later, from Aunt Lorraine, from court records, from a folder in my mother's nightstand, was that my father had filed a restraining order. He told the court my mother was emotionally unstable and a danger to the child's routine. He had a letter from a psychologist named Dr. Webb, who'd evaluated my mother once for 45 minutes and concluded she had adjustment disorder with anxious features. Webb was my father's golf partner. My father paid for the evaluation out of pocket. Cash. No insurance paper trail. The restraining order was modified in 2004. My mother was permitted observation from a public distance of no less than 100 feet. She could watch. She could not approach. She could not speak to me. She could not send mail, make phone calls, or attend any event where she might interact with me directly. 100 feet. That's about 33 yards. About 11 rows of seats in a school auditorium. Row 22. My mother sat in row 22 for the next 22 years. I didn't know. My father told me she never came. He told the school. He told the coaches. He told the neighbors. He told Aunt Lorraine, though Lorraine never fully believed him. He told me she didn't care enough to show up. He told me she chose herself over me. He said it without anger, which made it worse. Anger you can argue with. Calm conviction you can't. Some people aren't built for being parents, Sophie. It's not your fault. It's just who she is. I believed him because he was the only parent I had. And when the only adult in your life tells you something every day for 22 years, it becomes the truth not because it is, but because you don't have another version to compare it to. I stopped asking about her by the time I was 10. Stopped hoping by 12. Stopped caring by 15. Or told myself I did, which is a different thing entirely. My father raised me alone. I'll give him that. He showed up. He packed lunches, peanut butter, and jelly every day, no variation. He drove me to school. He attended parent-teacher conferences. He signed permission slips. He bought school supplies from the Walmart on Woodruff Road every August. He was present in the way a foreman is present on a job site, reliable, consistent, and entirely without warmth. He never hugged me. Not once that I can remember after age 9. He never once said he was proud of me. Not when I made honor roll. Not when I scored the winning run in the district semifinal. Not when I got accepted to Clemson. He said, "Good," the way you'd say it when someone tells you the oil change is done. He shook my hand at my high school graduation, in front of 600 people. He extended his hand the way you'd greet a business contact. I shook it because what else do you do when your father treats your diploma like a completed work order? Aunt Lorraine was there. She was sitting 6 rows behind my father. She told me later she watched him shake my hand and had to leave the gymnasium because she was afraid she'd say something she couldn't take back. She found me afterward in the parking lot and hugged me for a long time and said, "Your mother would be so proud of you." I didn't know what to say to that. I hadn't heard her name spoken out loud in years. It felt like hearing a word from a language I'd forgotten I knew. There were other moments. Small ones. The kind that don't seem cruel until you line them up. When I was 12, I asked if I could put a photo of my mother on my dresser. He said, "Why would you put up a picture of someone who doesn't think about you?" I put the photo in a drawer. I still have it. It's the only photo of her I had until the negatives. When I was 14, a girl at school named Jessica Palmer asked if my mom was dead. I said I didn't know. She looked at me like I'd said something impossible. How can you not know if your mom is dead? I went home and asked my father. He said, "She's alive. She just doesn't want to be a mother." Some women are like that. That sentence lived inside me for 17 years. Some women are like that. Like it was genetic. Like not wanting your child was a personality type. Not a lie told by a man standing in a kitchen organizing his coupons. When I was 16, my father found a birthday card in the mailbox with no return address. Pink envelope. My name and handwriting I didn't recognize. He held it up at the kitchen table and said, "Junk mail." He put it in the recycling bin. I didn't think about it again until I was 31, sitting on my mother's apartment floor, holding a stack of returned letters stamped "Delivery refused" in red ink. She'd been sending them every year. He'd been throwing them away. 17 birthday cards. 17 refusals. And I thought she'd forgotten. Coach Henderson, my softball coach at Greenville High, told me once, junior year, that a woman had called the school asking about my schedule. She wanted to know if there was a game on Saturday. I told her there was. She said thank you and hung up. Never gave a name. I told my father. He said it was probably a telemarketer. I believed him. Mrs. Calloway, my AP history teacher, told me senior year that she'd seen a woman sitting alone in the last row of the auditorium during the fall play. She left before the lights came up. Didn't talk to anyone. I asked my father about it. He shrugged. People wander into school plays all the time. Free entertainment. I believed him again. That's the thing about a lie told calmly for 22 years. It doesn't need to be clever. It just needs to be the only story in the room. I went to Clemson on a partial scholarship. Studied business administration. Worked weekends at a garden center in Pendleton for $7.75 an hour. I lived in a dorm room the size of a walk-in closet with a girl named Amy who talked in her sleep about her mother's Thanksgiving stuffing. I never talked about my mother. Not once in 4 years. When people asked about my family, I said it's just my dad and changed the subject. I got good at changing subjects. It's a skill you develop when the real answer is a restraining order and a story you don't have all the pieces to. I graduated in 2016, magna cum laude. My father came. He sat in the football stadium with 40,000 other parents and he clapped when my name was called. One clap. I counted. Lorraine clapped until her palms were red. I got a job at a marketing firm in downtown Greenville. Small agency. 8 employees. I handled social media for a chain of dental offices and a local HVAC company. I was good at writing copy for other people's lives. Your smile is in good hands. We keep your family comfortable. Slogans about care and warmth and showing up. The irony didn't hit me until later. The pay was $38,000 a year. I rented a studio apartment on Stone Avenue. $700 a month. No dishwasher. A window unit that leaked when it rained. I ate a lot of pasta and canned tomato sauce. I went to bed early because there was nothing to stay up for, and nobody waiting on the other end of a phone call. Lorraine called every Thursday at 7:30. She asked about work, about the apartment, about whether I was eating enough. She never mentioned my mother directly, but every call ended the same way. You know you're not alone, right? I always said yes. I was lying. She probably knew. My father approved. Steady was his highest compliment. My father came to Greenville once during those years. He took me to a Waffle House on Pleasantburg Drive. We sat in a booth by the window. He ordered coffee and a patty melt. I ordered hash browns, scattered and smothered. We ate in near silence for 20 minutes. Then he said, "You look like her." I froze. He'd never compared me to my mother. Ever. "I mean, you look healthy," he added quickly. That's all I meant. But that wasn't all he meant. And we both knew it. I dated a man named James for 2 years. He worked at the same agency. He was kind in the way that men are kind when they haven't been hurt yet, generous and unguarded. He proposed on a Tuesday evening in our apartment. I said yes. We planned a small wedding. My father said he'd walk me down the aisle. He said it like he was confirming a delivery time. James met my father once before the wedding. A dinner at an Outback steakhouse because my father said it was the only place that doesn't overcook a steak. James wore a button-down. My father wore a polo. They shook hands. My father ordered a bloomin' onion and a 12-ounce ribeye. James ordered the chicken. Halfway through dinner, James asked my father what my mother was like. The table went quiet. I could hear the kitchen through the swinging door. Plates. Voices. The sizzle of something hitting a flat-top grill. My father set down his knife. She wasn't around long enough to be like anything. James looked at me. I shook my head. The smallest shake. The kind that says, "Don't push this." He didn't. He changed the subject to college football. My father finished his steak, left a 15% tip, said goodnight in the parking lot, and drove away before we'd buckled our seatbelts. In the car, James said, "Your father talks about your mother the way people talk about weather from 10 years ago. Like it was something that happened to the neighborhood, not to a person." He was right. And that was the problem. My father had turned my mother into a weather event, something that had passed through and left no forwarding address. The wedding was in October 2020. 38 guests. My father gave a toast. He said I was self-sufficient. That was his word. Self-sufficient. Not beautiful. Not brilliant. Not loved. Self-sufficient. Like a solar panel. Aunt Lorraine came. She sat in the 3rd row and cried through the ceremony. Afterward, she hugged me longer than anyone ever had. She smelt like something that made my throat close for a reason I couldn't explain. "She would have loved this," Lorraine whispered. "Who?" "Your mother, Sophie." James and I built a quiet life. We bought a house on Verde Boulevard. Small, 2 bedrooms. A yard with a crepe myrtle that bloomed pink in July. I cooked dinner most nights. He did the dishes. We went to bed by 10. It was the kind of life my father would have planned on a spreadsheet, and it was the kind of life I needed after 22 years of living inside someone else's version of the truth. Then my mother called. September 2024. My phone rang on a Wednesday afternoon. A864 area code. Greenville. I answered without thinking. Sophie? I knew the voice immediately. Not from memory. From something deeper. The same place that remembers vanilla lotion and the sound of Charlotte's Web bread in a voice that did all the parts. It's Vivian. It's your mom. I sat down on the kitchen floor. Not because I chose to. Because my legs chose for me. She told me she was sick. Breast cancer. Stage 3. She'd been diagnosed in August. She said she didn't want to call until she knew for sure. She said she'd spent 22 years not calling because a court order told her she couldn't, and now that the order had expired and she was dying, she figured she had nothing left to lose. I'm not asking you to forgive me, she said. I'm asking you to let me explain. I hung up, sat on the kitchen floor for 40 minutes. James came home from work and found me there. He sat down next to me, didn't ask, just sat. After a while, I said, my mother called. Okay, she's dying. Okay, she says she can explain. Do you want to hear it? I don't know. Then we'll figure it out. That's the thing about James. He doesn't fix. He doesn't solve. He sits on the floor next to you and waits until you know what you need. Some people think that's passive. Those people have never needed someone to just be there. I went to see her the next Saturday. She lived in a small apartment on Pleasantburg Drive. 2nd floor. 1 bedroom. The kind of apartment that gets warm in the afternoon because it only has windows on one side. She looked older than I'd imagined. Thinner. But her eyes were the same. Brown, like mine. She had the same hands. Long fingers. She wore a blue cardigan that had been washed so many times it was almost gray. She made tea. We sat at her kitchen table. It was round. Pine. 2 chairs. She'd set out a plate of shortbread cookies from a tin. I came to everything, she said. I didn't understand. Every school play. Every softball game. Every recital. Every science fair. Every parent-teacher night I could get into without being noticed. Every graduation. I came to all of them. Dad said you never showed up. I know what he said. I sat in the last row. Row 22. Every time. For 22 years. What would you have done? If you'd spent 22 years believing your mother didn't care, and then you were sitting in her apartment holding proof that she'd been there all along? Drop your honest answer in the comments. I set my tea down. I couldn't hold the cup. My hands had stopped working the way hands stop working, when the ground underneath you shifts and your body hasn't caught up yet. Every single one? I said. Every single one. For 22 years. I missed your 6th grade field day because I had the flu and couldn't drive. I cried for 3 days. Not because I missed the event, because I broke my own streak. She said that with the same dry humor I recognized as mine. The ability to say something devastating and make it sound like a weather report. How? I asked. How did you do it without anyone knowing? I wore different coats. Different hats? I parked in different lots. I never went to the same entrance twice if I could help it. I sat in different sections when the seating wasn't assigned, but always the back. Always the last row they'd let me into. I got good at being invisible. Your father taught me that. He just didn't know he was teaching the other side of the lesson. She got up from the table and went to the hall closet. She came back with a cardboard box. Then another. Then another. She made 7 trips. 7 boxes. Each one labeled with a year range in black marker. The first box was light. The second was heavier. The seventh was the heaviest because it held the most recent years, when my mother had switched to a camera with a motor drive and shot more frames per event. Inside, photo negatives, 1,412 of them, sorted by year, sorted by event. Each one in a small paper sleeve with a date and a description written in her handwriting. Sophie, third grade play, butterfly costume, Oct 2003. Sophie Science Fair, Volcano Project, April 2005. Sophie Softball Regionals, Greenville High, May 2011. She'd shot them on a manual Minolta she'd bought at a thrift store for $40. She used black and white film because it was cheaper and because negatives last longer than prints. I couldn't afford to develop them all, she said. And I couldn't send them to you. The order said no contact. So I kept the negatives. I figured someday you'd hold them up to the light. I held one up to the window. 2003. A school auditorium. A 9-year-old girl in a butterfly costume, standing on a stage. And in the back row, barely visible, a woman, sitting alone. Hands in her lap, head slightly tilted forward. My mother, at my school play, the one my father said she missed. I went through every box that afternoon, every year, 2003 through 2024. She was at everything. Everything. Freshman softball. Senior prom night, she'd stood in the parking lot across from the venue and photographed me getting out of James's car. College graduation at Clemson. She was in the back. I found the negative. It showed the stage from so far away that my face was just a dot. But she'd labeled it Sophie Clemson, May 2016. I cried the whole time. She came to my college graduation. She told me she'd sat in the nosebleed section of Little John Coliseum, so far up that she couldn't read the diplomas being handed out. She identified me by my shoes. I was wearing the red flats Lorraine had given me for my birthday. You were the only one in red shoes, she said. I looked for them the entire ceremony. When I found them, I knew you'd be all right. She came to my wedding. My father didn't know. She stood behind the church, across the parking lot, with her Minolta. She took 11 photographs. The last one showed me walking out the front door with James. She labeled it Sophie Married. Oct 2020. She looked so happy. I sat on the floor of her apartment, surrounded by 1,400 negatives, and cried in a way I hadn't cried since I was 9 years old. Not sad crying. Not angry crying. The kind where your body is trying to process 22 years of a lie collapsing in a single afternoon, and it doesn't have enough room to hold it all, so it comes out through your eyes and your nose and your hands, which were shaking so badly I couldn't hold the negative straight. My mother sat across from me on the floor. She didn't reach for me. She waited. Like she'd been waiting for 22 years and a few more minutes didn't matter. How many? I whispered. 1,412. I counted them last week. You counted them? I've counted them 100 times. When I couldn't sleep, I'd count them. Like sheep. Except instead of falling asleep, I'd fall apart. She said that with a half smile. Dry. Like something that used to hurt but had been polished smooth by years of handling. I recognized that humor. It was mine. I'd been making jokes like that my whole life, and never knew where I got it from. Why black and white? I asked. Why not regular photos? Black and white film was $2 a roll at the Goodwill on Augusta Road. Color was $8. And negatives don't fade. Prints do. I wanted them to last. I wanted them to outlast the lie. That sentence, I wanted them to outlast the lie. I wrote it down later on a napkin and taped it to my bathroom mirror. It's still there. Why didn't you fight it? I asked. I did. For 3 years. I spent everything I had on lawyers. Your father had Dr. Webb's evaluation. He had the church elders testifying that I was unfit. He had his notebook with dates and times showing he was the primary caretaker. I couldn't compete with his version of the story, so I accepted the modification. Observation from a distance. It was the closest I could get. 100 feet. Row 22. I visited her every day after that, for 5 months. I brought soup on Tuesdays, shortbread cookies on Fridays. We went through the negatives together, box by box, year by year. She'd hold one up and say, "Oh, this one. You were so nervous. You kept pulling your sleeve." And I'd remember the event, but not the nervousness. She remembered everything I'd forgotten. On good days, she'd tell me what the weather was like. It rained that afternoon. I sat in the car for an hour waiting for it to stop so I could get to the door without getting the camera wet. On bad days, she'd just hold the negatives and say, "You were there. I was there. That's enough." She died on March 8th, a Saturday. I was holding her hand. Aunt Lorraine was sitting in the chair by the window. The hospice nurse, a woman named Donna, dimmed the lights and left us alone. The last thing my mother said to me was, "You were never alone at those games, Sophie." Not once. Lorraine and I planned the memorial together. It took 3 weeks. Lorraine handled the logistics, the church, the flowers, the programs. I handled the slideshow. Or what everyone thought was the slideshow. I spent those 3 weeks in a darkroom I'd rented at a photography co-op on Augusta Road. $20 an hour. I developed 60 negatives. Hand-selected from the 1400. The most important moments. The ones with the clearest title cards in my mother's handwriting. I printed each one on 8x10 glossy paper and arranged them in chronological order on my kitchen table. 22 years of attendance laid out like a timeline of the lie my father told. James helped me scan them onto a USB drive. He didn't say anything while we worked. He just handed me each print, face up, and waited. When we finished, he looked at the last photo, my wedding, from the parking lot and said, "She was there. She was always there." I know. I just needed to say it out loud. The memorial was held at Greenville Community Church on a Saturday afternoon in April. 53 people. My father was invited because Lorraine said it was the right thing to do. I didn't agree, but I didn't fight her on it. I didn't tell anyone what I'd found. Not yet. My father arrived in a gray suit. He sat in the 4th row. He nodded at people. He shook hands. He performed the role of a man who'd once been married to the deceased and had handled it with dignity. Lorraine had asked him to say a few words at the end. A brief tribute. He'd agreed. He'd written something on a note card. I saw him rehearsing it in the hallway, moving his lips, checking his watch. The service began. Hymns. Scripture. Friends, sharing memories. Lorraine spoke about Vivian's laugh. Donna, the hospice nurse, spoke about her courage. James held my hand in the 2nd row. Then came the slideshow. Lorraine had assembled photographs of my mother from her childhood, her wedding, her years as a young mom. But I'd added something at the end. I'd spent 3 weeks developing the negatives. 60 of them. Carefully selected. Chronological. Each one now a full-size print on a USB drive plugged into the church projector. The slideshow played through my mother's childhood. Her school photos. Buck teeth and pigtails. Her high school graduation. She was valedictorian, something my father had never mentioned. Her wedding day. She wore a dress she'd sewn herself because they couldn't afford one from a store. The audience murmured and smiled, and someone in the back said, "Oh, look at that." And Lorraine nodded from the podium. Then the screen changed. The murmuring stopped. The smiling stopped. Everything stopped. 2003. A school auditorium. The butterfly play. A 9-year-old girl on stage. And in the back row, barely visible, a woman sitting alone. A title card appeared. Vivian. Row 22, October 2003. Someone in the audience shifted. A chair creaked. 2004. A different auditorium. A Christmas concert. The same woman. Same row. Same posture. Hands in her lap. Vivian. Row 22. December 2004. 2005. A gymnasium. Science fair. The woman is standing now, behind the last row of folding chairs, camera in hand. Vivian. Row 22. April 2005. If you think my father deserved what he saw on that screen, drop your honest reaction in the comments. The photographs kept coming. Year after year. My mother, in the back row of every event I'd ever had. Softball games. Track meets. Band concerts. Honor roll ceremonies. Graduation rehearsals. The audience understood before the halfway point. You could feel it. The shift wasn't a sound. It was a temperature. The room got still the way air gets still before a storm. Helen Marsh, my mother's neighbor for 16 years, pressed her hand over her mouth. She'd never known Vivian went to those events. She thought Vivian had given up. Bill Foster, my old Little League coach, stared at the screen with his arms crossed. His wife Martha nudged him. He shook his head slowly and didn't look away. Mrs. Calloway, the AP history teacher who'd once mentioned a woman in the back row, leaned forward in her chair. Her hand found the armrest. Her knuckles went white. She'd told me about that woman 15 years ago. She'd tried to tell me, and I hadn't listened. Jessica, Lorraine's daughter, was crying, silently, both hands on her face. My father sat in the fourth row. He didn't move for the first 12 photographs. His body was rigid. His hands were on his knees. His jaw was set. He was trying to calculate his way out of it, the way he calculated everything, mileage, expenses, work orders. But you can't calculate your way out of 1,400 negatives. Tom Harrison, who'd coached alongside Coach Henderson, turned in his chair and looked directly at my father. Not with anger, with recognition. The kind of look that says, I see you now and I wish I'd seen you sooner. Pastor Williams, who'd officiated my parents' wedding 31 years earlier, closed his eyes. Uncle Ray, who was sitting 3 rows behind my father, leaned to his wife and said loud enough for the people around him to hear 22 years. She went for 22 years. And he told us she didn't care. His wife put her hand on his arm. He shook his head. He kept shaking it through the next 8 photographs. Margaret Weiss, a woman who'd been on the school board when I was in elementary school, pulled a tissue from her purse. She wasn't crying yet. She was preparing. The photographs reached 2011, my junior year, softball regionals. My mother was standing behind a chain-link fence in the outfield, camera to her eye, alone. The photo was shot through the chain-link diamonds. You could see the wire pattern in the foreground and my mother's face behind it. It looked like a cage, and I suppose it was. The 2012 photograph appeared. My 9th grade band concert. A clarinet player on a stage. The photo was taken from so far back that you couldn't tell if the clarinet player was smiling or grimacing. The title card, Vivian, row 22, seat 7, November 2012. She played beautifully, even the wrong notes. Somebody in the 3rd row made a sound, not a word. An intake of breath that carried 22 years of not knowing. The prom photo, 2013, taken from across the street. Me getting out of a car in a blue dress. The parking lot lights. My mother must have been standing behind a telephone pole or a mailbox. The frame was partially obscured on the left side. She'd labeled it Sophie Junior Prom, May 2013. She has my grandmother's smile. Sarah Foster, Bill's daughter and my childhood friend, turned to her mother. She was at prom, she whispered. Nobody told us she was at prom. Her mother grabbed her hand and held it. Coach Henderson was in the audience. He'd driven from Spartanburg. He stared at the screen and then turned to look at me. His jaw tightened. He mouthed 2 words, every season, because he'd talked to that woman on the phone for 9 years and never known she was watching from the parking lot. The photographs reached 2016, my college graduation at Clemson. The shot was taken from so far away that my face was barely a dot on the stage. The title card read, Vivian. Section G, row 22, May 2016. I cried the whole time. Somebody exhaled. A long, slow breath, the kind that carries 22 years of held-in suspicion. My wedding photos appeared. October 2020. Taken from across the parking lot. The title card. Vivian. Church parking lot. Oct 2020. She looked so happy. The whole room shifted. Not a gasp. Something quieter and worse. Understanding. Lorraine was standing at the podium. She hadn't known about the added photographs until this moment. She looked at the screen, then at me, then at my father. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out for 5 seconds. Then she said, very quietly into the microphone, she came to everything. The screen went dark. 53 people. Not one sound. My father's hands moved from his knees to his face. Both hands, covering his eyes. The way a man covers his face when the thing he built is collapsing and he can't stop it, and he can't leave, and every person in the room is watching it happen. He was supposed to speak next. His note card was in his breast pocket. The tribute he'd rehearsed in the hallway. Lorraine looked at him from the podium. She waited. 10 seconds. 20. The silence was heavier than the hymns had been. My father stood up. His hands were shaking. He reached for his note card. His fingers couldn't grip it. It fell to the pew. He bent to pick it up, and his knee hit the bench in front of him. He straightened, looked at the room. 53 faces looking back. Every one of them had just seen 22 years of proof that the woman he'd said never showed up had never missed a single event. He tried to speak. His mouth opened. No sound. He looked at Lorraine. She didn't help him. She stood at the podium with her hands at her sides and waited. The way Vivian had waited. In the back row. For 22 years. Except Lorraine was standing at the front, and the whole room was watching, and there was no calculation in the world that could solve this. My father looked at me. For the first time in the entire service, he looked directly at me. I was in the second row. James was holding my hand. I didn't look away. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I just held his eyes the way my mother must have held her camera. Steady. From a distance. Not asking for anything. Something crossed his face. Not remorse. Not yet. Recognition. The look of a man who's been caught standing on ground he built with lies and realizing that the ground was never solid in the first place. Helen Mars shook her head slowly from the 5th row. The same slow shake that means I believed you, and I shouldn't have. Bill Foster uncrossed his arms. His wife had tears running down both cheeks. He put his arm around her and didn't look at my father again. My father put the note card back in his pocket. He turned toward the side door. He walked out. Not fast. Not slow. The pace of a man who knows that running would make it worse, but staying is impossible. His shoes on the tile. Click, click, click. The rhythm of a man who can't run but can't stay. The side door opened. The light from outside poured in bright, almost blinding after the dimness of the sanctuary. He stepped through it. The door closed behind him with a soft hydraulic hiss. An engine started in the parking lot. Then gravel. Then nothing. He left his own ex-wife's memorial service in front of 53 witnesses without saying a word. He left with a note card in his breast pocket that he never read. A tribute to a woman he'd spent 22 years erasing, written on a 3x5 card that he practiced in a hallway while her negatives were being loaded into a projector. Tom Harrison said to his wife afterward, she never missed a single one. And he made sure the girl never knew. Helen Marsh found me after the service. She was holding a tissue in each hand. I lived next door to your mother for 16 years, she said. She told me she had a daughter. She never said she wasn't allowed to see you. She just said, I go to everything. I thought she meant she went to your house. She went to the auditorium, the field, the parking lot, wherever the rules let her stand. Helen sat down in the nearest pew, like her legs had decided before her brain. She stayed there for 10 minutes after the church emptied. Lorraine told me later she found Helen still sitting in that pew, holding a funeral program with both hands, whispering to herself. 16 years, she said. I lived next door to that woman for 16 years, and I didn't know. James found me in the hallway outside the sanctuary. I was standing against the wall, holding the USB drive in my hand. My hands were steady. That surprised me. For 22 years, the truth had been the thing that shook me. But now that it was out, I was the stillest person in the building. Mrs. Calloway found me next. I told you, she said, 15 years ago. I told you there was a woman in the back row. I believed my father. I know. She took both my hands. But you believe yourself now. Coach Henderson came up last. He didn't say much. He never did. He shook my hand and held it. Your mom called me every season to check the schedule, he said. 9 years. I always wondered why she never sat closer. 100 feet. Court order. He closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them. Row 22. Row 22. Within 3 months, the truth settled into Greenville the way roots settle under a sidewalk slowly, silently, cracking everything that was built on top. My father stopped attending church. Pastor Williams called him once. My father said he was taking a break. He never went back. 3 of his closest friends stopped calling. Bill Foster returned a set of socket wrenches he'd borrowed in 2019 and didn't come inside. Tom Harrison ran into my father at the hardware store and said, I used to admire how you held it together, Richard. Now, I just wonder what else you held together. The neighbors on Oakmont Drive were polite but distant. Mrs. Keller, who'd brought him casseroles after the divorce, told Lorraine she felt foolish. I made that man 14 casseroles, she said. While his ex-wife was sitting in parking lots with a camera. Webb, the psychologist who'd written the evaluation, retired the following summer. Lorraine said she heard his license was under review after a complaint was filed by someone who'd been at the memorial. I didn't ask who filed it. I didn't need to. The church where my parents married, the same church where we held the memorial, removed my father's name from the deacon's plaque in the fellowship hall. Pastor Williams didn't make an announcement. He just had the maintenance man take it down on a Tuesday afternoon. Someone noticed the blank space. Nobody asked for it to be put back. My father sold the house on Oakmont Drive last November. He moved to a condo in Simpsonville. Smaller. No magnolia tree. No chain link fence. No front yard where my mother's petals used to fall. He called me once. December. His voice was thin. I did what I thought was right at the time. You filed a restraining order based on a fake evaluation from your golf partner. You told me she didn't care. You told the entire town she never showed up. She came to every single thing I ever did for 22 years, and you made sure I didn't know. Silence. She was in row 22, Dad. The same row. For 22 years. Because that's how far away the law said she had to be. And she still came. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then, I didn't know she kept going. That's the worst part. You didn't care enough to check. He hasn't called since. I don't expect him to. Some doors close from the inside, and the person who closed them doesn't get to knock. I set 2 conditions for any future contact. First, he writes down what he did. Not, we had our differences. Not, your mother and I had a complicated relationship. He writes, I filed a restraining order based on a fraudulent psychological evaluation. I intercepted your mail. I told you she never came. She came to everything. Second, he acknowledges it to Lorraine. In person, out loud. Those are my conditions. He hasn't met either one. James and I are expecting a daughter in August. We're naming her Vivian. My father hasn't asked about the name. He hasn't asked about the pregnancy. He hasn't asked about anything. Lorraine comes over every Sunday for dinner. She brings a dish and stays until 9. She tells stories about my mother that my father never told. The time Vivian won a baking contest at the state fair with a peach cobbler. The time she drove through a snowstorm to bring Lorraine's son to the emergency room. The time she laughed so hard at a movie that the people in front of her turned around and started laughing too. I have the negatives in a cedar box in my living room. The box was James's idea. Cedar, because my mother once told Lorraine that cedar keeps things safe from time. I'm developing them slowly. 2 or 3 a week. Each one a photograph I was never supposed to see. I made a wall in the nursery. Vivian's room. 8 frames so far. 8 moments from 22 years. The butterfly play. The science fair volcano. The softball regionals. The Clemson graduation. The wedding. James said he wants the baby to grow up seeing her grandmother's work. Not just the photos, the act. The showing up. He said, that wall isn't art. It's a record of attendance. He's right. It's a 22-year attendance record. And every single box is checked. I developed one last week. 2012. My 9th grade band concert. I played the clarinet. Badly. I remember being embarrassed. I remember looking out at the audience and seeing my father in the 5th row, arms crossed, checking his watch. I held the negative up to the light. There she was. Row 22. Seat 7. My mother. Alone. Hands in her lap. Watching her daughter play the clarinet badly and probably loving every note. My name is Sophie Bennett. I'm 31 years old. My mother came to everything. She sat where the law told her to sit, and she never sat 1 inch closer. She watched me grow up from the back of every room I was ever in. She kept the evidence in boxes labeled by year and trusted that someday I'd hold them up to the light. 1,412 negatives. 22 years. 1 seat. Row 22. My father called it absence. My mother called it the closest she could get. Some parents show up at the front door with gifts and speeches and expect to be thanked. Some parents sit in the last row with a camera and never ask for anything at all. If you've ever been loved quietly from a distance by someone who couldn't get closer but refused to stay away, sit with that for a moment. I'll be right here on the porch when you're ready for the next one.